Last week at the Team USA training facility, the atmosphere reflected a significant shift in the landscape of professional basketball.
I know it's quick. Caitlin with the game winner. Caitlin with the game winner. A little bit. Chelsea, no look. Caitlin. Same thing is they're enjoying themselves, man. I love it. Okay, Angel to Stu.
As some of the most decorated veterans in the sport looked on, 22-year-old rookie Caitlin Clark executed a long-range shot with a composure that silenced the gym. There were no celebrations from the established players, only a notable tension that suggested a changing of the guard. It appeared to be the moment the veteran core realized the league's power dynamic had fundamentally transitioned. Professional sports operates as a commercial enterprise, where value is dictated by viewership and revenue. For 25 years, the WNBA functioned as a subsidized entity, relying on the NBA while maintaining consistent financial deficits. During this period, a group of veteran players cultivated a sense of entitlement, expecting a level of national attention they had not yet financially secured. This dynamic shifted when Caitlin Clark entered the league, breaking viewership records and generating unprecedented revenue. The response from many veterans has not been one of professional cooperation, but a visible attempt to reclaim momentum before being eclipsed by the rookie's market impact. The current Team USA camps serve as a backdrop for a broader institutional crisis. The WNBA Players Association is threatening a strike for the 2026 season, demanding maximum contracts, housing benefits, and a 50% share of revenue. While the union claims leverage based on the league's newfound profitability, market data suggests that revenue is tied almost exclusively to Clark's individual presence. The narrative of a collective sisterhood is being challenged by numbers that position Clark as the league's only irreplaceable asset. The unrivaled 3-on-3 league serves as a case study for the market value of the veteran roster without its newest star. Designed to prove the league could generate significant revenue independently, the venture resulted in a collapse of broadcast ratings. Network executives who anticipated a broader surge in interest found that the veteran brand struggled to maintain a national audience on its own. The situation was further complicated as key players suffered injuries in exhibition games with minimal viewership, reinforcing the reality that the league's economic engine is no longer driven by the established guard. While the Players Association prepares for a labor war, Clark has maintained a professional and focused demeanor. By avoiding social media disputes and passive-aggressive commentary, she has positioned herself as a stable, low-risk investment for sponsors and billionaires. This suggests that the current toxicity in the league is not an inherent part of the sport, but a reaction from a faction of players concerned with their own diminishing relevance. The union's strategy involves using Clark's popularity to force concessions from owners, but the rookie has already established a path that bypasses the league's control. If the players proceed with a strike on March 10th, they face potential financial instability, including the loss of salaries and housing benefits. Clark, however, remains insulated through international media rights secured with TNT Sports. Should the WNBA face a lockout, she can maintain her career through the FIBA World Cup qualifiers, leaving the striking veterans with few financial alternatives. This conflict appears to be less about labor rights and more about an attempt to exert control over a player who achieved more in 6 months than many veterans did in 20 years. The resentment stems from Clark's independent success, including high-profile endorsements with Nike and Gatorade that were secured without the approval of the league's traditional establishment. The union currently appears willing to jeopardize a $2 billion media deal to assert dominance over a player they cannot outperform on the court.
You know, this is every kid's dream. I think I wrote it down when I was in like 3rd grade, so I'm just excited about this opportunity, and I know AB isn't here, but even I played with Ryan on the U19 team, so I know we're a ways away even from the World Cup and obviously a ways away from the Olympics, but this is still really exciting.
In recent interviews, Clark has emphasized the opportunity as a dream, maintaining a level of humility that contrasts with the aggression of her peers. By focusing on the international stage, she has effectively removed herself from the union's tactical games. The WNBA's leadership is currently engaging in a high-stakes standoff with owners, but the league's financial backers are focused on the generational talent that drives market capitalization. If a lockout occurs, the veteran players may find they have orchestrated their own displacement, forcing a restructuring of the business that permanently strips them of leverage. In the business of professional sports, those who move the needle survive, while those who resist the evolution of the market face a spectacular downfall. The financial framework of the 11-year, $2.2 billion media rights agreement signed with Disney, Amazon, and NBC serves as the primary tension point between the WNBA league office and its players' union, while the WNBPA views this influx of capital as a collective victory for the labor force. The network executives who brokered the deal have expressed a different valuation. Internal data suggests that the television contracts were not priced according to the league's historical performance, but were leveraged against the specific, projected viewership generated by the arrival of high-profile collegiate stars. The union's demand for a 50% share of this revenue assumes that the labor force as a whole is responsible for the valuation. However, the networks have indicated that without the presence of a few select athletes, primarily Caitlin Clark, the market premium applied to these contracts would likely disappear. This creates a situation where the union is attempting to negotiate a collective benefit based on the individual market value of a player who is not aligned with their tactical approach. The legal mechanics of a 2026 lockout involve force majeure clauses within these multi-billion-dollar broadcast agreements. If the union follows through with a strike on March 10th, the league may be unable to fulfill its delivery requirements to partners like ESPN and Amazon. In a typical corporate environment, this would lead to immediate financial penalties or the suspension of payments. For the veteran players, this presents a significant risk to their long-term solvency. Many established players rely on seasonal salaries to maintain training regimens, medical staff, and personal overhead. Unlike Clark, who has diversified her income through individual endorsement deals that function independently of league play, the average veteran player exists in a state of total financial dependency on the WNBA's active season. A prolonged strike would not merely be a temporary pause in income, it would represent a total cessation of the only revenue stream many of these players possess. The WNBA's transition from a subsidized entity to a venture capital-backed enterprise has introduced new ownership perspectives that are less patient with labor disruptions. Figures like Matt Ishbia and Joe Lacob view the league through the lens of asset growth and market capture. For these owners, the priority is scaling the product to meet the demand of the millions of new fans who began following the sport in 2024. The union's current strategy, threatening to withhold labor during the most critical growth period in the sport's history, is viewed by many in the executive suites as a failure of fiduciary responsibility. The owners are currently assessing the viability of a replacement player scenario or a potential relaunch of the league under a new corporate structure. If the union forces the league into a total shutdown, the owners possess the capital to wait out a lockout, while the players do not. The international landscape offers a secondary theater for this conflict. Clark's recent agreement with TNT Sports to broadcast international qualifiers and potentially a series of high-profile exhibitions provides her with a platform that exists entirely outside the jurisdiction of the WNBPA. This shadow league model is a direct response to the domestic labor instability. By securing international rights, Clark and her management team have effectively nullified the union's primary weapon, the ability to deny the market the product. If Clark is playing high-stakes basketball in front of sold-out European or Asian arenas while the WNBA is dark, the fans and the media will follow her. The veteran players who have spent years branding themselves as the guardians of the sport would find themselves playing in empty gyms or competing for attention on secondary streaming platforms with no national reach. The failure of the unrivaled 3-on-3 league provides a quantitative look at the limits of veteran-led marketability. But the venture was built on the premise that fans were loyal to the sisterhood of the WNBA and would pay to watch the league's top veterans compete in a condensed format. The resulting low viewership numbers and lack of sponsor enthusiasm demonstrated that basketball fandom is not a monolith. The modern sports consumer is increasingly driven by individual narratives and specific high-level skill sets that transcend traditional team loyalty. The data from Unrivaled confirmed that the old guard brand, characterized by defensive physicality and internal league politics, does not have the same commercial pull as the offensive-focused, high-skill game popularized by the Iowa-trained rookie. This realization has sent a shockwave through the union's leadership, as it undermines their claim that they are the primary drivers of the league's value. The shift in viewership demographics also complicates the union's position. In 2025, the WNBA saw a surge in suburban, white-collar, and international viewers. This new demographic is less interested in the historical grievances of the league and more focused on the product on the court. They represent a clean slate for the sport's marketing efforts. The veteran players' attempts to frame the conflict as a struggle for social or historical justice are often lost on these new consumers, who see only a group of established professionals attempting to stifle the rise of a new star. This creates a public relations vacuum. While the union spends its resources on messaging aimed at their traditional niche base, Clark is capturing the broad mainstream audience that will dictate the sport's financial future for the next decade. Corporate sponsors like Nike, Gatorade, and State Farm are also quietly recalibrating their involvement in the sport. These companies do not sign deals with leagues, they sign deals with athletes. The individual athlete entity is now more powerful than the organization. If a lockout occurs, these sponsors are unlikely to pressure the owners to settle with the union. Instead, they will pivot their marketing budgets toward individual tours, digital content, and international appearances for the stars they have under contract. Nike's investment in Clark is not contingent on her playing 40 games a year for the Indiana Fever. It is contingent on her remaining the most visible and influential figure in women's sports. This shift in the sponsorship hierarchy further isolates the veteran players, who lack the individual leverage to secure these massive independent revenue streams. The psychological component of this standoff cannot be overlooked. The veteran players grew up in a survivalist era of women's basketball, where the goal was to keep the league alive at all costs. This fostered a culture of collective protection and seniority-based respect. Clark, conversely, is a product of the NIL era, where athletes are trained from a young age to view themselves as independent businesses. The friction between these two philosophies is at the heart of the current crisis. The veterans view Clark's refusal to fall in line as a betrayal of the sisterhood, while Clark's camp views the union's demands as an attempt to tax her individual success to subsidize players who have not demonstrated the same market value. As the March 10th deadline passes, the risk of a scorched earth outcome increases. A lockout would not only stop the momentum of the current media deal, but could lead to a permanent fracturing of the fan base. Historical precedents in other sports, such as the 1994 Major League Baseball strike, show that when a league alienates its fans during a period of peak interest, the recovery can take decades. The WNBA is in a more precarious position because its growth is so recent and so concentrated on a single figure. If the league goes dark, the millions of new fans who were just beginning to learn the rosters and the rules will simply move on to other forms of entertainment. The old guard may find that in their attempt to secure a larger piece of the pie, they have allowed the pie to disappear entirely. The logistics of an international pivot for Clark are already in motion. FIBA and other global basketball entities recognize the opportunity to capture the American audience that is being disenfranchised by the domestic labor dispute. By hosting high-profile tournaments and exhibitions featuring Clark, these organizations can establish themselves as the primary destination for elite women's basketball. This would represent a total loss of control for the WNBA and its union. The power to schedule games, sell tickets, and control the broadcast narrative would shift from New York to international hubs, effectively making the WNBA a secondary league in its own sport. The union's demand for a 10% ownership stake in the league is perhaps the most ambitious and most controversial aspect of the current negotiations. In most professional sports, ownership is reserved for those who provide the capital and assume the financial risk. The players' claim to equity is based on the idea that their labor is the primary driver of the league's valuation. However, the league's owners argue that the valuation surge is a result of their capital investment in marketing, infrastructure, and the acquisition of new talent. The presence of Clark has made the league a growth asset, and the owners are unwilling to dilute their equity just as the investment is beginning to pay off. The union's refusal to back down on this point has led to a total breakdown in communication, as both sides view the issue as a fundamental question of who truly owns the future of the sport. The 2026 season was supposed to be the moment the WNBA solidified its place in the American sports mainstream. Instead, it has become a case study in labor mismanagement and the challenges of integrating a generational talent into a legacy system. The old guard players are fighting for a version of the league that no longer exists, a league where seniority and collective bargaining could dictate terms to the owners. The new reality is a meritocracy driven by data, viewership, and individual brand power. In this new system, the veterans are finding that their years of service do not translate into market leverage. The internal rift within the WNBPA is also becoming more visible.
Paige always yelling. Paige yelling about anything these days. Easy work. It seems like Caitlin is hanging with Kelsey a lot. Got the stun on him. Come on, man.
Younger players who entered the league in the last 2 seasons are reportedly less enthusiastic about a strike. Many of these players recognize that their long-term earning potential is tied to the league's growth and the Clark effect. They are hesitant to sacrifice their early career years for a labor battle that primarily benefits the veterans at the top of the pay scale. If a significant number of these younger players decide to cross the picket line or refuse to authorize a strike, the union's leverage will collapse from within. The role of the media in this conflict has also been subject to scrutiny. For decades, the sports media landscape was protective of the WNBA, often prioritizing positive PR over critical reporting. The current crisis has forced a change in that approach. Reporters are now looking at the numbers, the contracts, and the viewership data with a more objective eye. The resulting coverage has been increasingly critical of the union's tactics, highlighting the disconnect between their demands and the market reality. This shift in media sentiment has removed another layer of protection for the veterans, who are no longer shielded from the consequences of their public statements and actions. The billionaires who own the expansion teams in San Francisco and Toronto are particularly vocal about the need for labor stability. These owners have paid hundreds of millions of dollars in expansion fees, with the expectation that the league will be operational and profitable. They are not interested in the historical grievances of the veteran players. They are interested in the return on their investment. If the union continues to threaten the 2026 season, these owners may lead a movement to dissolve the current CBA entirely and implement a new system that limits the power of the union and ties player compensation more directly to individual revenue generation. The final outcome of this standoff will likely be determined by who blinks first. The owners have the financial reserves to withstand a season of lost revenue. Caitlin Clark has the independent brand and international options to remain relevant and wealthy without a WNBA season. The veteran players, however, have neither. They are trapped in a system of their own making, where their only leverage is the threat of self-destruction. As the clock ticks toward the March 10th deadline, the reality of their situation is becoming impossible to ignore. The WNBA is moving forward into a new era of commercial dominance, and it is becoming increasingly clear that the old guard will either have to adapt to the new reality or be left behind as relics of the league's subsidized past. In the coming months, the narrative will shift from the future of the WNBA to the future of Caitlin Clark. The league and its union are becoming secondary characters in the story of an athlete who has surpassed the platform that was supposed to contain her. Whether she is playing in Indiana, London, or Tokyo, the audience will follow. The veteran's attempt to put her in her place has resulted in the opposite. She has built her own place, and it is much larger than the room they were trying to keep her in. The business of sports is indeed cold and absolute, and the numbers have already declared a winner. The only question remains how much of the original league will be left standing when the smoke clears.